Zoom in on the map. We are in Chile. This narrow scar on the map is called Atacama Desert, a fragile ecosystem slowly being drained dry and disappearing just to run our smartphones and EV cars. In the east, the massive Andes, mountains that are blocking all the moisture from the Amazon. From the west, the freezing Humboldt Current cools the air so much that rain clouds physically cannot even form properly. It causes this to be one of the driest and fragile places on Earth. To show you how fragile it actually is, the soil is so well adapted to dryness that sudden rain can actually wipe out many of the ancient microbes because they can't handle the moisture. Let's take a closer look at this massive white patch. It looks like a frozen lake, but it's the Salar de Atacama. And those strange neon blue geometric shapes you see cutting through the white crust, they aren't swimming pools. They're massive evaporation ponds, visible from space. You may assume that the Atacama Desert should be left peacefully due to the weather conditions, but here comes the weird twist. A massive lithium race is taking place right in the middle of it. We often call this rare metal a white gold. Beneath all this dust lies one of the world's biggest stashes of it. We need it for our smartphones, EVs, and batteries. Needless to say, all this metal is considered very pricey for the mining companies. To get it, they're literally drinking the desert dry by aggressively pumping up millions of liters of ancient brine, the desert's only groundwater. We're talking about evaporating 500,000 gallons of water for just 1 ton of lithium. Results are devastating from one site. Blue lagoons with numbers of flamingos are shrinking. The indigenous Licantante people are watching their ancestral lands turn to dust. But on the other hand, we're building a green future for our cities based on the lithium taken from the Atacama Desert, claiming that we are actually saving the planet. Here comes the ultimate green paradox. At the same time, we often call it a biological dead zone, and yet we see our future in it. The emptiness and silence of the Pacific Ocean might feel a bit overwhelming, with all these remote islands full of jungles and paradise beaches. No lights, no sounds, almost no people. We tell ourselves a convenient explanation. These islands are empty because they are too remote, too small, or too harsh to support life. Yes, but that's not the full story. In fact, before the tall ships arrived, many of these islands were home to thriving, dense civilizations. What looks like blank space on a map was actually the heart of maritime empire, long before Columbus' skilled navigators were using stars to travel, building a commerce and culture web. But the Europeans carried not only goods, but also smallpox, measles, and dysentery. According to researchers, to a population with no prior immunity, the impact was catastrophic. In places like Hawaii, the population collapsed by over 80% in just 1 century. Or look at Fiji, where a single measles outbreak in 1875 wiped out 40,000 people, 1/3 of the entire population in a matter of months. Communities that had thrived for thousands of years were brought to the brink of extinction almost overnight. Entire genealogies were wiped out in a single season, leaving bustling villages silent and fields overgrown. Then in the 19th century, another, more human factor came into play: the labor trade, called blackbirding. This time, ships from Australia and South America swept through the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu to simply steal the manpower. They needed strong arms to fuel their sugar plantations. Between 1863 and 1904, 60,000 young people from the Pacific Islands were trapped and taken away to Australia alone. This sudden loss created a significant gap in local communities. With so many men gone, the burden of daily life shifted to the elderly and women. They had to adapt to keep their villages functioning. So, the silence of the Pacific is complex, partly due to the harsh reality of living on remote rocks in the middle of an ocean, but also because of a turbulent history. What might be one of the fastest population collapses on the entire planet is happening right here, in a tropical holiday paradise. Welcome to Cuba, a country that is essentially evaporating. In just the last 5 years, roughly 10% of Cubans has packed their bags and left. We're talking well over 1 million people simply gone. I bet the biggest question comes to your mind right now. Why would anyone leave those beautiful beaches and one of the best climates in the world? Math is crucial here. Imagine working on a daily basis on your Monday to Friday job. It's been a tough month for you. And after all, you just earned just enough to get by. Maybe 50 or 60 eggs. Trading on the Cuban peso to US dollar and inflation in the country went wild. Results are dreadful. According to human rights monitors, nearly 90% of the population now lives in extreme poverty.
Hey, hit subscribe.
And also, historical irony might be a bit crushing. We used to call Cuba the sugar bowl of the world, but today the whole industry has collapsed. Sugar on the island is now often imported from France. It hits even harder when it comes to chickens. Cuba hasn't always had a good relationship with the US, but today it's from there that they import, among other things, chickens for their citizens. Money is not the only problem for Cubans. The whole country still runs on ancient Soviet power plants. They burn oil. For decades, the oil was basically shipped to Cuba at heavily subsidized rates from Venezuela. But the supplier got major problems now, and the oil stopped flowing. Cuba has gone dark, literally. Blackouts in some provinces can last even for 20 hours a day. It causes massive movement of people to the north. How massive? There's a wild statistic. Miami now has a GDP that easily doubles that of the entire island of Cuba.
In Hawaii, the Big Island is quite literally expanding. Every few years, glowing rivers of lava spill from Kilauea or Mauna Loa and pour into the ocean, instantly turning seawater into steam and molten rock into a brand new coastline. Since the 1980s, eruptions have added hundreds of acres of new land. Far to the north, Alaska's capital has a very unique position. Juneau may look like any other city on a map, but there's one catch. You can't drive there. Huge mountains and massive glaciers block every route, leaving the town completely cut off from the rest of the continent. Seriously, the only way in or out is by boat or plane. Up in Alaska's far north, the city of Utqiagvik spends about 66 days in polar night from mid-November to mid-January with no sunrise. Then it flips to weeks of 24/7 daylight in summer. The Outer Banks in North Carolina are known for slowly moving west, getting pushed inland by waves and storms that scoop up sand from the ocean side and drop it on the sound side. It's known as the place where hurricanes can easily create new inlets. In California's Eureka Dunes, sand can sing. When dry sand grains move down a slope, they bump against each other and create a deep humming or booming noise that can last for several seconds. Scientists refer to this phenomenon as booming sand, but early explorers believed the desert was growling. Some places can't sit still, and others refuse to stop growing. The Rocky Mountains, for example, are still growing. Unlike the older Appalachian Range, which stopped millions of years ago, the Rockies are geologically young and active. It's a slow process that can't be properly measured, but we do know that they are rising. Did you know that rivers are not always content with their direction? In the 1800s, the Chicago River flowed straight into Lake Michigan, all the way into the city's drinking supply. After years of sewage and sickness, engineers thought of something original. They made the river run backward. They dug canals, blasted through rock, and rerouted the current toward the Mississippi instead. To this day, the river still flows the wrong way. Kentucky is famous for being split between two time zones. The western half runs on Central Time, while the east keeps Eastern Time, meaning you can gain or lose an hour just by driving through the middle of the state. The Nevada desert is filled with ghost towns. There are over 600 of them. Most were born overnight during the mining booms, only to die just as fast when the gold ran out. Wooden saloons, empty banks, and rusting rail lines still sit under the sun like movie sets left behind. But what about a ghost town that has a fire burning underneath? In Pennsylvania, there's a place called Centralia that's been on fire since 1962. A coal seam beneath the town caught fire and never went out. It forced nearly everyone to move. The ground still smokes even today. Another fact, my favorite one, is about the whole island full of monkeys. Near the coast of South Carolina, Morgan Island is home to around 4,000 rhesus monkeys with no humans in sight. The monkeys were brought there for research decades ago, and the population exploded. Visitors aren't allowed ashore, partly to protect the colony and partly, well, because it belongs to monkeys now. In Montana's Glacier National Park, there's a mountain where one raindrop can choose 3 paths. Fall on one slope and it flows into the Pacific Ocean. Another sends it to the Atlantic. A third sends it north toward the Arctic. The spot is called Triple Divide Peak, and it's one of the few places on Earth where 3 oceans share a single starting line. And if you think 3-way water splits are rare, there's also the Continental Divide that doesn't actually divide anything. In Wyoming's Great Divide Basin, rainwater gets trapped in the middle and has nowhere to go. It doesn't reach the ocean at all. It just evaporates or sinks into the ground. A lonely no-exit zone in the middle of the continent. Mount Washington is famous because it once held the record for the fastest directly measured surface wind at 231 miles per hour in 1934. That's faster than a race car and strong enough to knock you flat in seconds. Have you ever heard about Lake Superior? It's so vast that it holds about 10% of all the world's surface freshwater. The sheer size of it changes the weather. It is creating its own fog and storms. It's so extremely cold that it affects the air above and produces its own snow. What about bioluminescence? In Florida's Indian River Lagoon, microorganisms called bioluminescent plankton light up the water at night, turning it into a soft electric blue when stirred. It's a rare and beautiful sight to behold. In the middle of Utah's Red Desert, there's a natural bridge so large it looks engineered by giants. It's called Landscape Arch, a ribbon of stone stretching nearly 300 feet from end to end. That's almost as long as a football field, yet only a few feet thick at its narrowest point. A section of it collapsed in the 1990s, and today it's so fragile that hikers can only admire it from a distance. However, Utah hides another enigmatic structure called the Upheaval Dome. Scientists aren't sure it's a meteor impact or the result of ancient salt pushing upward from below. Either way, it's a massive circular crater that looks like the desert tried to grow a mountain in the wrong direction. In Arizona, we have the Barringer crater. It's one of the best preserved meteor craters on Earth, about 3/4 of a mile wide and nearly 600 feet deep. Scientists believe it was carved out 50,000 years ago when a space rock the size of a small building slammed into the desert at around 29,000 miles per hour. In Michigan, between the two peninsulas, there's something unexpected: a floating post office. The Westcott Company has delivered mail on the river since the late 1800s. The J.W. Westcott II has done it since 1949. It's even got its own zip code, 48222. The ship sails up to passing freighters and delivers mail by rope and buckets. It's the only floating zip code in the country, and proof that even the Postal Service can be creative and cool. On the East Coast, Maryland happens to be the only U.S. state without natural lakes. The ones you see, like Deep Creek or Lake Habib, are human-made. Even Arizona has a couple of natural lakes. They just dry up during drought years. Southwest of there, Florida likes sinking holes. Below the sunny beaches and retirement communities is a landscape made of limestone, which dissolves in water. This creates thousands of sinkholes ranging from little pits in backyards to huge underwater caves. Central Florida even got the nickname Sinkhole Alley. Off the coast is one of the biggest examples, the Green Banana Hole, which goes 155 feet under the Gulf of Mexico. In Arkansas, there's this cool park that you have to visit. You can actually dig for treasure there. It's called Crater of Diamonds State Park. It's the only spot in the US where anyone can hunt for real diamonds and keep whatever they find. The park is sitting on an old volcanic crater that brought diamonds to the surface millions of years ago. Oklahoma, however, is infamous for its tornadoes. It averages around 50-plus tornadoes a year and ranks among the highest for their strength. Each spring, the sky there turns from calm blue to chaos in minutes. Another quirky place is in Wyoming. It's called Buford. It's known for having a population of just one person. It's right off Interstate 80, and for years, this one resident was also the mayor, store clerk, and postmaster all rolled into one. After about 2 decades, he moved on and the town got auctioned, complete with its gas station and the sign that proudly read, Population 1. Sounds haunted, huh? Well, that's it for today. I gave you 25 US facts to help you shine during your next trivia quiz. And you can hit like. See ya!
Now, this tiny town on a US map used to exist only on paper, literally. Agloe was never built, never had a mayor, and yet, for a short while, it was officially on the map. Back in the 1930s, 2 map makers from American's General Drafting Company were hired to make a map of New York State. But they wanted to protect their work from copycats. So they created a ghost town and named it after themselves, Otto G. Lindbergh and Ernest Alpers. Take their initials, mix them up a bit, and you get Agloe. Or is it Agloe? Well, no one's quite sure, since it never existed anyways. You see, creating fake towns used to be a thing, because copying maps was also a thing. In the past, map making was serious business, and protecting your work wasn't easy. So cartographers got clever. They started adding tiny traps, fake streets, made-up lakes, even whole towns to spot copycats. These sneaky details were called trap streets or paper towns. If someone copied your map, they'd copy your invention too. It was a quiet way of saying, "Busted," and then taking them straight to court. Then the funniest thing happened. A few years later, another company published a map with Agloe on it. When confronted, they said, "It's not fake. There's a general store called the Agloe General Store right there." Turns out, someone had seen the town's name on a map and decided to open a shop under it. Today, the store is gone, and Agloe is back to being just a lonely road intersection in the Catskills. Now, sometimes fake lands appear on USA maps not on purpose, but because of simple cartography mistakes. Take Isle Filippo, for example. This mysterious island with a fancy name was once proudly shown on maps of Lake Superior, even though it never existed. Back in the 18th century, French travelers were busy exploring the Great Lakes when they saw, or thought they saw, 4 islands out there. Let's just say their methods weren't always precise. But a French cartographer named Jacques-Nicolas Belin didn't know that. He trusted their travel notes and drew Isle Philippe on a map he made in 1744. The problem is that other map makers trusted Belin's work and copied the island onto their maps too. Before long, Island Filippo was as real as any place could be, on paper at least. It stayed on official maps, confusing travelers, all the way into the 1820s. That's when explorers finally checked and realized, wait, there's nothing here but open water. Today, historians think the whole thing was a mix-up. The explorers probably confused it with Isle Royale, a real island that's part of Michigan. They were described as 2 islands about the same size, but there was only one all along. Next stop, Nothing. You heard that right, Nothing is the real name of a tiny ghost town in Arizona. If you ever drive down Route 93 between Wickiup and Wickenburg, keep an eye on the towers along the way. On one of them, there used to be a wooden sign painted in red letters that simply said nothing. Hopefully it's still there. This spot marks what's left of a once hopeful settlement in the middle of the blazing desert. Back in 1977, a man named Richard Buddy Kenworthy decided to found his own town. He built nothing out of almost nothing. The place had a gas station and a tiny convenience store, but that was it. Then he added a big yellow sign that proudly declared the town of Nothing, Arizona, population 4. And yep, that was its peak, only 4 inhabitants. I know your family dinner table might have seen bigger crowds. But anyway, in May of 2005, Kenworthy packed up and left, and Nothing was officially abandoned. 3 years later, its famous gas station began to crumble. But some fans, I guess we can call them that, decided to bring Nothing back to life. There was even a small pizza place running there for a while, but it didn't last long. By 2011, Nothing was, well, nothing again. And today, it's one of the most famous abandoned towns in the USA. Now, speaking of abandoned towns, some were lost to time, others to something far more dangerous, like Centralia, Pennsylvania. From a distance, everything looks fine, but take a closer look, and you'll notice something strange. Roads cracked open, smoke rising from the ground, and no people in sight. That's because Centralia isn't just abandoned. It's been on fire for more than 60 years. It all started back in 1962. Although there were many theories about how the fire began, the results are well known. The flames spread into the labyrinth of coal mining tunnels running beneath the town, causing devastation as they went. Fissures opened in the ground, sending plumes of smoke and toxic gases into the air, and the fire never stopped. That's right. At first, no one thought much of it, especially because everything was happening underground, out of sight. But soon, smoke began seeping up through the soil. Then, in 1981, a huge sinkhole suddenly opened under the feet of a 12-year-old boy. Thankfully, he grabbed onto a tree root and survived. But that was all the proof locals needed that the fire wasn't going away. Experts warned that the underground blaze could keep burning for more than 250 years. And that's why most of Centralia's 1,000 residents decided it was time to pack up and leave. Today, fewer than 10 people still live there, refusing to move. The rest is nearly a ghost town, with empty streets and crumbling foundations. They don't even have a zip code anymore. Beneath it all, the coal is still burning quietly, making Centralia one of the eeriest forgotten towns in America. And now, you might be wondering, how many more of these towns are out there in the U.S.? Well, a lot. Just in Texas alone, there are an estimated 511 ghost towns that are now completely deserted. Then there's Nevada, believed to be home to over 600 phantom towns, many of them left behind after the gold and silver rushes of the 18 and 1900s. People moved there to work in the mines, and when the mine shut down, they left. But abandoned towns and mapping errors aren't just a U.S. thing. Even in the age of satellites and Google Earth, fake cities still manage to sneak onto maps all over the world. One of the most famous modern examples is a place called Argleton. Back in 2008, a guy named Mike Nolan was checking out Google Maps, looking around the area where he grew up, in West Lancashire, England. Then he spotted a city called Argleton, but something felt off. He remembered that spot being just a farmer's field near the village hall. Maybe a footpath crossed it, but that was about it. There was definitely no real city out there. And he was right. It was a total mistake. Nobody knows exactly how it got there, but it did. Don't bother looking for it, though. Argleton was officially removed from Google Maps by May 2010. And even if you look for its old coordinates today, you'd only see an empty, muddy field. Alright, so Argleton might have been fake, but it sure had a lot of fans. When people first discovered it online, they went a little wild. And then came all the jokes. People were actually selling souvenirs that said, "I visited Argleton and all I got was this t-shirt." Some local restaurants even offered Argleton pie, and the ingredients were, well, nothing. Believe it or not, even today you can still find merch online celebrating the world's most famous Google Phantom Town. Well, that's the end of our tour of the strangest ghost towns on the maps of the USA, and even beyond. So, tell me, have you ever been to an abandoned city before? Have you ever discovered hidden places on the map that shouldn't even exist? Well, share your story in the comments below. Sandy Island is a creepy landmass that appeared on world maps for nearly 200 years before vanishing into thin air. Located in the South Pacific between Australia and New Caledonia, this phantom island was first documented by explorers in the 18th century and continued to pop up on maps and even scientific surveys. But when a research ship sailed through its supposed coordinates in 2012, they found nothing but open water. They even measured the ocean depth at this spot, and it was always more than 4,000 feet deep, so there was no chance of a big piece of land could be hiding under the water. To make things even weirder, when you look up its exact coordinates on Google Earth, you'll still see a faint outline of what looks like a long, thin island, but with no landmass in sight. Theories about its disappearance talk about possible cartography errors, but the mystery of how a whole island fooled the world for centuries is still unsolved. Now, speaking of mysterious islands, let's dive into the enigma of Hashima Island. Located off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, this small island was once a bustling coal mining facility, thriving with workers and families. But as the demand for coal declined, the island was abandoned in the 1970s, leaving behind a haunting ghost town. Today, Hashima stands eerily silent, with crumbling concrete buildings and overgrown vegetation. And if you are brave enough, you can do a virtual tour using Google Earth. But there are other places where digital maps won't let you see much, like the Ward Islands in Australia. If you search for its coordinates, you'll notice a bunch of blackout spots near the coast. This has led to all sorts of wild speculation online, sparking curiosity about what might be hidden beneath the surface. I mean, is it just a glitch? Or could there really be some unusual wildlife down there? Well, we still don't have concrete answers for these obscured areas, but it is worth mentioning that this region is part of a wilderness protection area. This place is an important zone for the Australian sea lion and the New Zealand fur seal, for example. So, these blackout spots could be just part of a plan to keep everything private and protected out there. From creepy islands to abandoned places, if you ever find yourself driving through Rio de Janeiro, you might catch a glimpse of something unsettling: a group of creepy Santas, faded candy canes, and rusty slides surrounded by palm trees and dense greenery. This is Park Aba Noel, an eerie, abandoned Christmas-themed amusement park in Brazil. The park's creator had big dreams, thinking it would become a massive, eclectic attraction with different themed areas. We're talking about a space the size of 460 football fields. Work started in 2000, but the place shut down a few years later after the creator tragically passed away in a car accident just meters from the park's entrance. Today, the attractions are slowly being taken over by rust. This totally feels like something out of a sci-fi movie, but those multicolored rings are actually right here on Earth, in Yellowstone National Park to be exact. At 370 feet in diameter, it is the largest hot spring in the United States and the third largest in the world. When you see it from above, the different colors come from various types of bacteria that act like real-life thermographic filters. Each type of bacteria thrives at different temperatures, and their colors reflect the heat levels in different parts of the spring. Our next stop is in Italy, where you can find the Villa de Vecchi, also known as the Red House or the Ghost Mansion. For every ghost mansion, there's an urban legend behind it. Now, while nothing we're about to say is confirmed, the tale is still pretty interesting and downright bizarre. Built in the mid-19th century by Count Felix de Vecchi, this once grand summer residence quickly became the site of tragedy. The Count's wife passed away under mysterious circumstances, and his daughter disappeared, never to be seen again. Devastated, the Count is said to have spent his remaining days searching for answers. Over the years, the mansion fell into ruin, with local legends adding to its haunted reputation. Some claim to hear strange noises or see ghostly figures, while others whisper about unusual rituals that might have taken place there. Though crumbling and overgrown, Villa de Vecchi remains popular for those intrigued by its eerie history. While we've explored eerie and abandoned human-made structures, let's take a look at a place where nature's forces left their own massive mark: the Meteor Crater in Arizona. The site was formed in an instant about 50,000 years ago, when a large iron-nickel meteorite slammed into Earth. Measuring just under a mile wide and 560 feet deep, the crater is one of the best-preserved impact sites in the world. Standing at its edge, you can almost picture the incredible force of the impact, wiping out everything around it. Today, the meteor crater is a fascinating geological landmark, drawing in scientists and curious visitors. From a Google Earth point of view, this area in Niger looks creepy, and what seems to be clusters of glass domes dotting the landscape, almost like an interplanetary colony. But in reality, it's kind of an illusion. Those domes are actually small semicircular pits, and they're part of the Just Dig It project. Can you dig it? These pits, known as water buns or earth smiles, are dug to capture rainwater and restore dry, degraded land. It's a simple but genius method that helps bring life back to areas suffering from desertification. By trapping water, these buns allow vegetation to grow again, cooling the land and reviving ecosystems. Now, you have probably heard of the famous Nazca lines in Peru, right? We're talking about those massive ancient geoglyphs carved into the desert, which have shapes like a spider, a monkey, and a hummingbird. Well, recently, something similar popped up, and it's got the internet buzzing. This new figure, located at the top of a mountain, looks a lot like a wild boar. While it's super cool to find a potential new geoglyph, the lack of solid info and the not-so-sharp edges make us think it's just a natural formation. It's still pretty intriguing, though. But if you head down south to Chile, that's where you'll actually find a real geoglyph. We're talking about the Atacama Giant, which is around 390 feet tall. What looks like a funny drawing seems to represent some sort of spiritual figure or deity. There's no solid proof of what it actually means, but experts believe this design might have worked as an early astronomical calendar. The points on the top and sides of the head are said to indicate the seasons based on how they align with the moon. Meanwhile, you might also find some mysterious shipwrecks while exploring Google Earth, like the MV Plassey in Ireland. This ship met its tragic fate back in 1960, when a heavy storm and strong winds blew it ashore at Finnis Rock, tearing a hole in the vessel's bottom. Water started rushing in from underneath. After some shouting and running in all directions, the crew managed to get out of the ship. Today, the vessel's remains are still at Finnis Rock and have become a popular attraction. You can still see its hull, which keeps falling apart over time, making the whole scene even creepier. And we've also got something interesting involving the Titanic. Now, it's true that the ship is really 13,000 feet underwater, so you actually can't see it with satellite cameras. But if you type these coordinates into Google Earth, you'll find the spot of the Titanic accident. It's not that creepy of a place. I mean, it's really just a huge expanse of blue. But still, it's pretty interesting to get the big picture of how they seem so far from everything on that tragic night when the ship went down.
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylasolio. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan arum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now, the islands are home to unique species both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future. If there was a contest for being a bad town, Singapore would be the winner. And no, I'm not talking about Singapore in Asia. I'm talking about a small town called Singapore in Michigan, United States, that buried itself because of one simple mistake. This tiny, unlucky settlement was founded in 1837 by O'Shea Wilder. He had a dream to build a town and did just that, but he definitely didn't know how the city would end. After the first year, it struggled economically, but soon after, it found its path in lumber work. At its finest, it had a population of 300 people. In 1842, the city experienced a pretty hard winter. Its inhabitants were left with no food and no way of surviving. But by some miracle, they found a ship that had recently sunk near the town's coasts. Luckily, the ship was packed to the brim with all kinds of food. They also had one of the best lighthouses, but not for long because it fell down and got destroyed in a few years. People didn't restore it, saying that they didn't need one despite being a hotspot for ships. That's nice of them. Then a couple of years later, everything started going downhill, and half of the Midwest burned in a big fire. Surrounding towns turned into ashes, but this place remained intact. Trees were burned in the surrounding towns, but Singapore had an untouched forest ready to be harvested. They began cutting trees, particularly the white pine tree. This, of course, busted the town's economy. As we all know, cutting a lot of trees is pretty bad. But nobody could predict what would happen next, unless they were experts in dunes. The location of Singapore was unique. On the left side, they had a lovely beach by Lake Michigan. In front of them, there was a river, and everything else was a forest. But the most critical part of the town was the forest near the beach, which was sitting on top of sand dunes. I don't know if you know this, but trees don't usually grow in sand, but I guess this place was special. These dunes weren't like those typical ones in the Sahara or any other desert. Such dunes can only be found near the ocean or, in this rare case, on the coast of Lake Michigan. This formation can be more than 4,000 years old and as tall as 196 feet. Their formation is a pretty simple process. The river that enters the lake carries tons of sand. Then the sand is distributed all over the beach by waves. Later, it dries out and is blown by the wind, but not far. It's caught by all kinds of vegetation. And voila, you have a sand dune. This process has been heavily studied by scientists, and it's been concluded that plants play an essential role here. They stabilize the dunes by preventing the sand from being blown out, and the roots help the sand not to fall apart. Plus, they hold water, and if you've ever made a sandcastle, you know wet sand doesn't fall apart. If only the Singaporeans had known this before starting their tree-cutting business. Plants develop in a couple of stages. The first stage is called pioneers. Some plants begin the dune building process, but over time, they perish and become food for the next generation of plants, which is called scrub. In this category, tiny trees and vines are extremely vulnerable, but important for what comes next. If everything goes right, a rare thing in sandy areas will grow: a forest. This stage of plants is so unusual in such regions that it can only be seen in the US on the Atlantic coast or near Lake Michigan. Forests like the one in Singapore are 1 in a million because they mostly consist of white pine trees. That's one of the best woods for lumber. Now let me tell you a little secret. Those pines were the only thing keeping the sand dunes in place. Well, after they had cut down all the trees on the dunes, the Singaporeans realized they had made a massive mistake. After not so much time, the sand got dry, and guess what? The wind started carrying it right into the town. In a panic, they somehow moved their houses onto log boats, took them downriver, and unloaded them in the next town, Saugatuck. Some of the houses are still in use now. Some people were either stubborn or couldn't load their giant houses on logs, and they stayed in the town. A family lived in a 3-story house, and as the wind blew, the house was slowly getting covered with sand. They moved upstairs as the floors beneath them became unavailable. Eventually, they ran out of floors. Instead of Santa Claus coming down their chimney, they got a pile of sand. And when that happened, they finally decided to move out of Singapore. In 1894, the city was officially declared a ghost town. This is not an isolated case. Many houses are getting buried now. People are paying tons of money to remove sand from their homes, and most cases occur around Lake Michigan. There are also a few in Africa. The Sahara dunes can move and cover the whole of Europe. You might be wondering what's going on in Singapore today. Basically, it's a big pile of sand with a sign that says there is a whole town underneath. The sand preserves around 37 houses. Maybe one day, archaeologists will find the town and dig it out, restoring it once again in its final glory. But people who lived there said that it was not worth the effort. Many building projects have been proposed there, But historians believe the town is important from a historical perspective and are against building anything there. Whatever they do, let's hope they won't cut the trees down again. We can all agree that what happened in Singapore is terrible for people. But unfortunately, it's not the only occurrence of its kind in the US. This time, trees and dunes had nothing to do with it. The next phenomenon, called the Dust Bowl, covered a large area, simultaneously affecting a few states: Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. The first people who saw the land around these states weren't too happy about it and said it wasn't good for farming because it was too dry. They even called it the Great American Desert, since there wasn't any water or trees over there. But some people took it as a challenge and stayed there. They believed it would eventually rain and the land would magically become fertile. It happened in the 1900s, and many new machines helping farmers with their work were being developed. Unfortunately, they overworked the land in the next 30 years, making it even drier. And yeah, the rain they had been hoping for never arrived. Instead, a big drought occurred. It lasted for 10 years, which further worsened the situation. More than 1 million acres were affected by this colossal dust bowl. The drought worsened yearly, and eventually, the topsoil turned into dust blown around by the wind, covering houses everywhere. The dust even reached Washington, D.C. But not all hope was lost, since people started trying to revive the land. The Civilian Conservation Corporation began planting around 200 million trees from Texas to Canada to prevent the soil from being blown out. Farmers began implementing new techniques like crop rotation that helped retain water. Authorities even started paying farmers to start working on the land to improve the condition further. All this hard work started paying off, and by the 1930s, the dust blowing was reduced by as much as 65%. But since 75% of the topsoil has already been displaced, it took another 8 to 10 years for the region to fully recover. One interesting thing that happens in map design is the so-called Baltimore phenomenon, or Baltimore effect. This phenomenon happens when a city or another object is left off a map because there's just not enough space, while smaller cities make the cut simply because there's room for them. The name comes from Baltimore, Maryland, which often gets left out of maps because it's surrounded by bigger cities like Washington, D.C. But on the flip side, sometimes smaller and less well-known cities like Alice Springs in Australia end up on the same map simply because there's enough space for them. Like at this scale, Alice Springs, which give or take 25,000 inhabitants, is labeled, but the huge city of Guangzhou, with over 14 million people, is somehow not. This phenomenon is more common on automated mapping sites, but it doesn't happen at every zoom level. On popular sites like Google Maps and other similar ones, you'll only start seeing Baltimore show up at certain zoom levels, like the 5th, 6th, or 7th zoom. Cartographers can tweak their maps to make sure they're useful and convey spatial information effectively, finding the right balance between showing important details and keeping the map clear and focused. The best maps are the ones that show key elements clearly, while still accurately representing the world. But Alice Springs is not the only weird thing on the map of Australia. Look at the time zone map. This 10.5 section looks a bit off, huh? Well, Australia is officially divided into 3 standard time zones: Western, Central, and Eastern. Australian Central Time aligns with UTC plus 9:30, with individual states and territories deciding whether to observe daylight savings time. Australian island territories and Antarctic stations contribute to the complexity of the time zones. Despite this, Australian time zones are generally easy to understand. In addition to the official time zones, there is an unofficial hybrid time zone called Australian Central Western Standard Time. This time zone is halfway between Western Time, UTC plus 8, and Central Time, UTC plus 9:30. making it UTC plus 8:45, a unique quarter-hour difference. Australian Central Western Standard Time is only observed in a small area in far southeastern Western Australia, along the Eyre Highway. The Australian Central Western Standard Time area includes settlements such as Cocklebitti, Madura, Mundrabilla, Eucla, and Border Village. Only a few hundred people live in this region, making it easier for them to agree on a non-standard time zone. Despite the lack of official approval, Australian Central Western Standard Time continues to be followed due to the significant time gap between Western and Central time zones, especially during the summer when South Australia observes daylight saving time and Western Australia does not. The use of this unique time zone can often lead to confusion, even amongst the locals. Eucla Police, for example, operate on Perth's time zone, causing occasional tardiness to events such as community gatherings. Locals mentioned that in the past, Eucla operated on its own unofficial time, which made things simpler, before the transition to align with Perth time. They also face confusion as their location in South Australia does not observe daylight savings. The history of the Australian Central Western Standard Time dates back to the establishment of a telegraph station in Eucla in 1877. Although the exact origins of this time zone are unclear, it is speculated that it was adopted to avoid confusion at the telegraph station located on the border between Western Australia and South Australia. UTC plus 9:45 was historically utilized in Australia as a time zone known as Central Western Daylight Time. Certain roadhouses along the Eyre Highway in South Australia and Western Australia adopted UTC plus 9:45 during the summer months when South Australia observed daylight savings time. While not officially recognized by the authorities, the boundaries of this time zone are clearly outlined and often depicted on local road maps. 5 locations in Australia, including Border Village, Kaiguna, Eucla, Madura, and Mundrabilla, previously observed UTC plus 9:45. Currently, these areas operate on UTC plus 8:45 due to Western Australia's lack of daylight savings time. Australia is not the only example of weird time zones. China has a population of approximately 1.5 billion people, and it's the 3rd largest country in the world. Despite its vast size, China operates on a single time zone known as Beijing Time or China Standard Time. This unique time zone covers almost 5 geographical time zones within the country. At times, in some cities in China, the sun rises as late as 10 a.m. People often have lunch after 2 p.m. or even after 4 p.m. if they're not in a hurry. Since 1991, daylight savings time has not been observed in China. However, the region of Xinjiang, located in the western part of the country, follows Xinjiang time, which is 2 hours behind China Standard Time, and is considered an unofficial time zone. Nepal also has its unique time zone, as it operates on Nepal time all year round, without the use of daylight savings time. It's a bit unique compared to other countries because it has a UTC offset of plus 5:45, meaning that Nepali clocks are 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of Coordinated Universal Time. This is only a 15-minute difference from neighboring India, where the standard time used to be the same until Nepal decided to set its own time zone in 1956. Now, let's examine the map of Europe. Great Britain, Portugal, and Spain are all located at roughly the same latitude. However, despite this, it's 1 hour earlier in Portugal and the UK compared to Spain. Why is this the case? In the 1940s, Spain was instructed to switch to German time, a directive that was accepted by Spanish authorities. Over time, despite changes in leadership, Spain remained in the same time zone, resulting in it being 1 hour behind its neighboring countries at the same latitude. But like many other countries, Spain sticks to daylight savings time. Greenland would rank as the world's 12th largest country if it were independent, but it's currently part of Denmark. The country has 3 different time zones. Most of it is 3 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, except for only one town on the eastern coast, which is 2 hours ahead. Thule Air Base in the northwest operates on GMT-4, while the tiny population of Danmarkshavn sticks to GMT. Daylight savings time was implemented to give us more daylight during the evenings after work, which could help save energy by lowering the need for lights and heat. It was first suggested by Benjamin Franklin in 1784 to align waking hours with daylight and conserve energy, and was implemented in Port Arthur, Ontario in 1906. Since then, many countries have adopted the practice, though some regions near the equator or at high latitudes opt out due to minimal variations in daylight hours. In the United States, daylight savings time is observed almost everywhere, except in Hawaii and Arizona. Arizona's scorching hot weather makes daylight saving time kind of pointless. People there would rather get stuff done in the cool morning hours than sweat it out in the evenings. However, the Navajo Nation, which is autonomous Native American territory, sticks to the same daylight savings time schedule as the rest of the country. Even though it spans 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they keep the time consistent across their lands. As for Hawaii, due to its tropical location, the amount of sunlight doesn't change much throughout the year. If Hawaii changed its time zone to UTC-9 during daylight savings time, the sun would rise at around 7 a.m. in June. This is because most of the islands are situated towards the west of the Hawaii-Aleutian time zone, and theoretically should be in the next time zone to the west. In the past, Hawaiian Standard Time was based on a different longitude than it is now.
Some mistakes have the power to change the course of history. One such story has to do with an old, boring key that could have saved the Titanic from its infamous demise. The key belonged to the crow's nest locker that housed binoculars, which could have helped the lookouts spot the iceberg sooner. There's more. The key wasn't even on board the ship when it set sail. The second officer took it with him when he was taken off the ship at the last minute. As the story goes, the officer forgot to hand the key over to his replacement in his hurry to disembark. So, when the lookouts were in desperate need of binoculars, they were out of luck. One of the lookouts, named Fred Fleet, even testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it. And when asked how much sooner, Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." In 2015, some auctioneers got their hands on Blair's key and presented it as one of the most important artifacts from the Titanic. They truly believed it could have saved the ship. Blair kept the key as a souvenir and passed it down to his daughter, Nancy. At one point, it was up for auction with a price tag of over $80,000. Blair himself was quite the hero, it seems. A year after the Titanic disaster, he was awarded a gallantry medal for saving a crewman who had fallen overboard while he had been on board the liner Majestic. He may have forgotten a key, but he sure didn't forget to be a hero when it counted. This next story is both funny and tragic. It's about NASA's lost $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter. The spacecraft engineers failed to convert from English to metric measurements before the craft was launched, and as a result, they lost it. The navigation team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of millimeters and meters, while Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver used the English system of inches, feet, and pounds. JPL engineers mistook acceleration readings measured in English units of pound-seconds for a metric measure of force called Newton seconds. What's worse is that none of JPL's quality control procedures caught the error in the 9 months it took the spacecraft to make its 461 million mile flight to Mars. That's a long time to be lost in translation, don't you think? The miscalculations were enough to throw the spacecraft so far off track that it flew too deeply into the Martian atmosphere and was destroyed when it entered its initial orbit around Mars. It's embarrassing to lose a spacecraft to such a simple math error. And it's hard to think of another example of such a large loss due to English versus metric confusion. Ever heard about the mathematical mistake that led to the discovery of the New World? Spoiler alert, it involves a guy named Christopher Columbus and a really big globe. Back in 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with a mission to find a new trade route to Asia. He was convinced that he was less than 3,000 miles away from Japan, and just a bit more sailing would get him to the Indies with all their tasty spices. The only problem was that Columbus was a bit off in his calculations, like way off. He made a mistake in estimating the size of the globe, which led him to believe that Earth was far smaller than it actually is. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Columbus afraid that he would fall off the edge of the world? Contrary to popular myth, Columbus and his crew knew the Earth was a globe, just like the ancient Greeks did 2 millennia earlier. They weren't worried about falling off the edge, but rather about the size of the ocean they planned on crossing. And to make matters worse, Columbus had no idea that an unknown landmass existed between Spain and Asia. After weeks at sea, Columbus finally reached the Caribbean. He believed that he had landed on the outskirts of Asia, and so named the islands the West Indies. He went on to explore the Caribbean and the northern coast of South America. But here's where things get really interesting. Even though Columbus insisted until his last day that he had reached Asia, another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern shore of South America down to Brazil and proved conclusively that Columbus had actually discovered a whole new world. A German mapmaker saw Amerigo's maps and labeled the new landmass America after him. And since his maps were super popular at the time, the name stuck. One man named Alexander Fleming stumbled upon one of the most significant medical discoveries of all time by accident. At one point in his career, Fleming observed the demise of many people from uncontrollable infections. Antiseptics were used to fight this, but they often did more harm than good. In 1922, while he had a cold himself, Fleming transferred some of his, nasal discharge to a petri dish and left it on his cluttered desk. When he finally examined it weeks later, he found that an enzyme had some antimicrobial properties. It wasn't until 1928, when Fleming left an uncovered petri dish next to an open window, that he stumbled upon the discovery that would change the world. The dish became contaminated with fungus spores. And when he examined them under the microscope, Fleming discovered that the bacteria near the fungus were dying. He managed to isolate the fungus and found that it was effective against numerous things that caused diseases. And thus, penicillin was discovered. As Fleming himself put it, "I did not discover penicillin. Nature did that. I only discovered it by accident." Talk about a lucky break. In the early 1520s, the east coast of the United States of America was a big mystery waiting to be solved. The Spanish found Florida, and the English and Portuguese found Newfoundland, but the area in between was like a blank spot on the map. France decided to take action and sent an expedition to explore the area. They chose a guy called Giovanni da Verrazzano to lead the trip. For this expedition, he got 4 ships. Unfortunately, 2 of them were shipwrecked, and a third one went home after doing some other business on the Spanish coast. Only the flagship, La Dauphine, crossed the Atlantic with Verrazzano and his 50-man crew. Verrazzano set sail from Madeira. and landed at Cape Fear. From there, he sailed south, but got a little scared of running into the Spanish, so he returned somewhere north of Charleston. He anchored not far from his original landing spot, but unlike other explorers, he preferred to anchor well out at sea. He did send a boat to the shore, and he met the natives. They were described as wearing just some animal skins covering their bodies and garlands of bird feathers. As Verrazano sailed along the coast, he reached the outer banks of North Carolina. He thought that the waters he discovered were those of the Pacific. In reality, what he'd stumbled upon was the Pamlico Sound. He thought that North America was just a long, extremely narrow strip of land. This mistake led mapmakers to show North America as almost completely divided in two. Moving on, Verrazano reached a beautiful place that he called Arcadia. Probably Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Sailing further north, he missed the entrances to Chesapeake and Delaware Bays because he kept quite far from the coast until New Jersey. Then, the moment we've all been waiting for, Verrazano discovered New York Harbor, and he anchored in the Narrows. Later, it was named after him, and now it is spanned by the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Once Verrazano's sea appeared on the map, it became widely accepted and impacted loads of future explorers. For example, Henry Hudson went looking for a passage to the Pacific in the middle latitudes of the continent. But, as it turns out, the Englishman never did find the Pacific Ocean anywhere near Virginia. And the cartographic myth eventually faded away. It's funny to think about how a mistaken belief could have such an impact on history.
Behind those huge steel doors is one of the most guarded places on Earth. It's known as Site R, or the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. You'll find it in Pennsylvania. The construction is 60 stories underground and is said to be a safe place for people in case of a natural or human-made disaster. There's not a lot of information online about this mysterious place, but what we do know is that it's equipped with 38 communication systems. It's obviously not available for visits via Google Earth, but you can catch a quick glance at the two gates that face the complex. Vatican City is one of the most famous enclaves on Earth, and it's certainly worth a visit due to its wonderful architecture and vast list of art pieces to check out. One place, however, will always be off limits for visitors: the Vatican's secret archives. They have some of the oldest and rarest books on Earth. These archives are available only to a limited number of people, and since they have been visited by a small number of people so far, they also trigger a lot of weird theories. For example, that there may be books proving there's life outside our planet. If you're fascinated by shipwrecks, you'll be interested to know that one of the largest wrecks you can see on Google Earth is on North Sentinel Island, India. It used to be called the SS Jassim. It was a Bolivian ferry that sank in the area back in 2003. The reason why people can't visit it physically isn't because of the ship itself, but because the island is home to the world's most dangerous tribe. We don't really know how many people live there, but it was estimated that between 50 to 400 people call this place home. And they really don't like tourists. No person that tried to reach them survived. Also, to protect them, their privacy, and their special status, the island is closely monitored by the Indian authorities. That's mostly because it's believed the locals don't have any immunity to modern diseases. So being in contact with foreigners might be dangerous for the tribe's people, since they've never seen the outer world. A huge pink bunny appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the Italian Coleto Fava Mountains back in 2005. Besides the locals, some people stumbled upon it online too. They were puzzled by the discovery. Unfortunately, that 200-foot-tall bunny is completely gone today. You can still find the images of it online though. The unusual object was designed by artists from Vienna. They encouraged tourists to climb, jump, or even take a nap on top of the large rabbit. The whole purpose of the project was to allow people to experience what it would be like to live as smaller creatures. The bunny didn't have any removal date at the time it was placed there and was expected to last at least until 2025. But Mother Nature had other plans. a Japanese artist, decided to move back to her little home village named Nagoro. But she soon found out that most of her neighbors were moving to bigger cities. To deal with loneliness, she started putting together scarecrow-like dolls, or kakashi, and placing them all over her garden. She didn't stop there, though. The artist soon began doing the same with many other places in her village, creating dolls and placing them as if they were taking part in various human activities. These dolls keep moving around too, but the woman likes to stay true to her story and insists she doesn't touch them. You can see the images of this quirky village on Google Maps. This weird portal was discovered via online maps in New Baltimore, New York. It gave people all sorts of bad dreams. With spooky-looking buildings and all sorts of blurry figures, this area soon became a source for many weird internet theories. Turns out it was nothing more than a technical issue, which resulted in those images being rendered in a distorted manner. Either way, if you look for these images on Google, you won't be able to unsee them. This cute miniature world map was created by an artist from Denmark. He continuously worked on this tedious project from 1944 until 1967, using mostly his hands and just a few tools for moving heavy rocks around. He gathered stones at the edge of the water, then recreated the map of the world on the surface of this lake. During the winter, he was able to use a sled to transport larger pieces of rock over the ice and then place them in the perfect position. Apart from the continents themselves, the map also features rivers and lakes, as well as some other famous landmarks. Care to have a look at a sea without any coasts? Search for the Sargasso Sea. You'll find it in the northern Atlantic Ocean. This weird sea is surrounded by 4 ocean currents and no dry land at all. It got its name from the seaweed that grows there, sargassum. Fingerprints on the lens of a satellite camera? You may be tricked into thinking this if you search for the Finger Maze. It's located in the city of Brighton, UK, and is a large fingerprint created in Hove Park. It also has a maze at the center. It can be really hard and time-consuming to look for wild animals on Google Earth, but the Geo browser does have a nice feature that can help if you're eager to see hippos and flamingos in their natural habitat. Try Googling animals from above and start scrolling through these images. This unique feature can take you from Kenya to Namibia and even all the way to Antarctica, where you can see emperor penguins. There are some places on Google Maps that, for specific reasons, aren't available for the online public, like the Royal Palace in Amsterdam. If you head over there via Google Earth, you'll see that everything around the Dutch Royal Palace is still visible, like the vegetation and roads, but the construction itself is blurred from all angles. That's probably because local authorities want to keep the unique views of the palace for the eyes of physical visitors only. The same goes for the Tantaco National Park in Chile. This one is a privately owned nature reserve that can only be seen on Google Maps from a distance. Once you reach a certain point, the zoom feature stops working. Some people say that since it's a nature preserve, it may be home to some endangered species, and extreme measures are taken for their protection. You know how a certain brand of fried chicken has a certain kernel on their logo? Yeah, you won't see any of these logos in high resolution on Google Maps. That's because the online map uses specific algorithms to detect people's faces and blur them out. As you can see, it's not always really that accurate. It's called Snake Island, and the Brazilian authorities prohibit people from visiting it. For good reason. You'll find the island near the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. It's said to be home to over 4,000 snakes. Some of the most venomous types of reptiles on Earth call this place home. If that's not creepy enough, how about that some of them are so dangerous that a small drop of their venom can permanently damage the human skin? You can see the shape of the island on Google Earth, but the more you zoom in, the blurrier it becomes. Here's another cool thing you can do on Google Earth. Time travel. Well, at least sort of. You won't be able to travel back in time and tell yourself to study more for that tricky exam, but you can see certain historical images of places you like. You can check if this feature works by looking at the upper left corner of the screen. If you can see a small icon with a clock, it may allow you to scroll some years back. But you can also see how sunlight affects Earth if you turn on the sunlight feature.
In 1960, you could fish here. Today, the boats sit on sand more than 60 miles away from the water. The Aral Sea has dried up, and it wasn't an accident. Summer 2026 is likely to bring 10 to 12 massive toxic dust storms from the Aralkum, potentially the worst storm season ever recorded, and it might affect millions of people living in the region. The Aral Sea used to be the fourth largest lake on Earth. Today, most of it is just gone. The Aral Sea sits between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and despite its name, it was actually a giant lake with no connection to the ocean. Two big rivers, the Amu Darya and the Sir Darya, had been feeding it for many thousands of years. Until the 1960s, when people started taking large amounts of river water to grow crops in the desert, especially cotton. Massive canals redirected the rivers, and all that water didn't have time to reach the lake. The Aral Sea started shrinking fast. The less water reached the lake, the farther the shoreline moved away. Fishing towns ended up miles from the water, and boats were stranded in dry sand. In about 60 years, the Aral Sea lost about 90% of its original size. But that wasn't even the main problem. The exposed lakebed turned into a new desert called the Aralkum Desert. These days, it covers about 24,000 square miles. That's roughly the size of West Virginia. Winds sweep across the dry ground and pick up dust and sand. Those dust storms carry salt, chemicals, and polluted dirt into nearby towns and farms. Air quality got worse, crops stopped growing, and people started dealing with serious health problems. Now people are trying to slow down this disaster. One idea is to plant black saxaul shrubs across the dry lakebed. Those desert plants help hold the soil in place so the wind can't carry it away as easily. Sadly, it won't bring the Aral Sea back. But it may stop the region from getting even worse. New satellite images from the European Space Agency show how extreme the damage has become. Right in the middle of the landscape, there's a giant empty space where the lake used to be. Images from March 2025 reveal that the western side of the lake has shrunk a lot, and the eastern side has disappeared almost completely. Just one small part of the lake is still trying to survive. It's the small Aral Sea in Kazakhstan. In winter, parts of it even freeze over, and while the southern section might disappear soon, the small Aral can still be saved. One of the biggest projects is the Kokaral Dam. In satellite images, it looks like two long brown lines near the southeastern edge of the small Aral Sea. The dam was finished in 2005, and its job is simple: to stop water from flowing south and keep it in the northern section. Surprisingly, this plan worked better than anyone expected. Since they finished the dam, water levels in the Aral Sea have risen by about 13 feet. Salinity dropped too. The fish populations started recovering. A few fishing communities have come back to life. It's still far from the massive lake it used to be. The Aral Sea disaster is one of the worst environmental catastrophes on Earth. South of the lake, the historical Khwarazm region suffered a lot. It used to be a thriving region with farms, wetlands, rivers, forests, and fishing communities. Now, large parts of it look almost post-apocalyptic. When toxic dust reached towns and farms and contaminated drinking water supplies, the region fell into crisis. Many farms were destroyed because crops couldn't grow in poisoned soil. Tens of thousands of people lost their main source of income. Clean drinking water became hard to find, and diseases started spreading more often, especially respiratory illnesses and anemia. Lakes dried out, marshes disappeared, and rivers shrank. Forests turned into dry wasteland, and it happened very fast. In just a few decades, we managed to almost wipe out one of the world's largest lakes and completely ruin the climate, economy, and health of a large region. People are now trying to save what's left. There are large economic projects, foreign investments, and even plans connected to artificial intelligence and tech companies. For example, there's a plan to build computing centers and data hubs for AI-related businesses. But it's difficult to imagine right now. The region is still dealing with water shortages and pollution. At the same time, some projects sound much more realistic. For example, there's a United Nations program that helps farmers grow new types of rice that use far less water, up to 40% less than traditional rice farming. Interestingly, not everything in this disaster looks the same everywhere. Most reports zoom in on the areas that sit right next to the dried-up RLC. They get hit the hardest when toxic dust storms blow off the exposed lakebed. But a bit farther south and east, in places like Dashoguz in Turkmenistan and Khorazm in Uzbekistan, things don't look quite as bad. Part of the reason is that those areas are farther upstream, closer to where the rivers flow in. Satellite images show fewer abandoned fields there. Still, it doesn't mean those regions are safe. Dust storms, water shortages, and environmental problems still affect the entire area. Recently, giant storms have hit Karakalpakstan, Khorazm, and Dashoguz at the same time. And the struggle is far from over. The North RLC in Kazakhstan, the part that made a partial comeback thanks to the Kokarl Dam, is now under pressure again. The water coming in through the Sirdarya River might get too weak to fight off the intense summer evaporation. Water levels could seriously drop during summer 2026. If that happens, the water will get saltier again, and fish populations will take another hit. Sadly, the RLC disaster isn't unique. Many other lakes and reservoirs all over the world suffer from overuse and bad water management. Take Lake Chad in Africa. Back in the 1960s, it was one of the largest lakes on the continent. Today, around 90% of it is gone. That's what years of drought, rising temperatures, and heavy water use for farming did to the once magnificent lake. Even worse, as the water disappeared, millions of people lost fishing jobs, farmland, and drinking water. It led to the shortage of food and diseases. Many people had to move. Now look at the United States. Lake Mead, the giant reservoir behind Hoover Dam near Nevada and Arizona, has been shrinking for years. All because of a massive long-term drought and huge demand on the Colorado River. Sometimes the water got so low that people started worrying about losing electricity from the dam, and even whether big cities would still have enough water. Unlike some other places, parts of the American Southwest reacted fast, like Las Vegas. The city kept growing really fast, but somehow it still cut water use per person almost in half since the early 2000s. One big reason? People replaced huge lawns and decorative grass with desert plants that needed way less water. The city also built special deep water intake tunnels. This way, it could still pull water from Lake Mead even if the reservoir dropped to dangerously low levels. Then there's California's Salton Sea. Its story sounds disturbingly close to the RLC disaster. The Salton Sea is a giant inland lake in Southern California. For decades, water flowing off farms fed it, but then the water level dropped and huge parts of the lakebed dried out, exposing toxic ground underneath. Now winds blow dust filled with heavy metals and chemicals into nearby towns, causing heart and lung diseases. In some towns, people literally breathe toxic dust from the dried-out lakebed. California has already launched a large cleanup and dust control project. Those include wetlands and soil stabilization programs. But many experts say it might already be too late.
Forget the idea of Area 51 as a standalone base. In reality, it's just a single piece of a deeply classified empire, a restricted zone bigger than the entire European countries. we're being forced to look the wrong way, while a massive, secret operation runs right next to our everyday lives. Groom Lake, better known as Area 51. This stretch of the vast Nevada desert probably brings to your mind the ultimate vault of American secrets. Well, the map is lying to us by omission, basically. For decades, we've been programmed by pop culture to believe that in this very place, a heavily guarded facility with all the flying saucers and captured aliens are kept. Since we're focusing all our attention on this tiny speck in the desert, we're actually missing the terrifying scale of what is hiding in plain sight. The true size of America's hidden empire is, first of all, forget the aliens and let's establish reality. What is being kept hidden in Nevada is far more expensive, complex, and strategically important than any science fiction film showed to us. Zoom out from the Groom Lake salt flat and suddenly the illusion of a completely isolated base shatters. This whole area is called NTTR, Nevada Test and Training Range. We need a solid perspective to imagine how big it actually is. That's 2.9 million acres of land, almost the exact size of Connecticut, entirely wiped off public access. Now the most terrifying part. It isn't happening on some remote, isolated island. An enormous, untouchable black hole sits right next to Las Vegas, operating in the shadows just miles away from one of the most popular tourist spots in the US. Over it, there's the Box, one of the most heavily restricted airspaces on the planet. You cannot fly over it. Commercial airlines route it around it, and if your private jet would fly into it by a mistake, you'll be immediately surrounded by armed fighter jets. NTTR is the ultimate sandbox for the Department of War, and Area 51 is just one small laboratory sitting inside it. And what about the logistics? It seems to be a nightmare to operate a classified system on a remote area like this. Thousands of engineers, soldiers, scientists cannot just simply drive every morning to work through the Nevada desert. It will also be a real threat to the secrets kept in it. This is where the true systemic nature of the region reveals itself. To feed this massive complex, the military created an entirely parallel, invisible airline. Have you ever been to Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas? It's one of the busiest civilian airports in the world. Civilian, but if you look past the tourist gates, you'll find a heavily secured private terminal. While ordinary people are grabbing coffee and waiting for their holiday flights, a completely closed, secret system operates right in front of them. You can spot their unmarked Boeing 737, completely white with a single, solid red stripe down the side. No logos, no company names, no flight numbers on public departure boards. Meet the Janet Fleet. While it officially stands for Joint Air Network for Employee Transportation, people are just calling it just another non-existent terminal. It's working as a job bus for all the contractors, which has to be transported every day straight to the restricted airspace of the NTTR. After finishing their shift, they're flying back to the city. The whole area is a heavily populated industrial complex requiring a constant, massive stream of human capital. It's not only about Area 51. The biggest misconception about the region is that all the cutting-edge technology is developed, tested, and stored at Groom Lake. The reality of modern aerospace engineering is that you cannot keep multiple generations of classified projects in the exact same hangar.
Hey, hit subscribe.
Different programs require different security clearances, different contractors, and different operational infrastructures. Therefore, the system had to expand. Look at the map again. About a 70-mile drive toward northwest of Area 51, you will see another massive anomaly, the Tonopah Test Range Airport. Just a reminder, we are still inside the restricted area on NTTR. While the public was obsessed over Area 51, and we're looking for any signs of UFOs, The real operational secret weapons were quietly moved to Tonopah. We're talking, for example, about the revolutionary F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter hidden here. The Area 51 was only the test, research, and development lab. The Tonopah acted like a deployment job where the entire secret squadron trained and operated. Just look at the satellite imagery of Tonopah today. It features a massive 12,000-foot runway and over 50 individual climate-controlled hangars perfectly aligned in rows. It's a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure built in the absolute middle of nowhere, specifically designed to hide aircraft from spy satellites during the day and only fly them under the cover of darkness while tourists are partying just down the highway. The geographical assembly line of secrets look like this. At first, highly classified projects were born in the corporate labs of Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman in California. Then they were quietly flown into Area 51 for initial, highly restricted test flights over the Groom Lake salt flats. Once the technology is proven, it doesn't stay there. It's transitioned to secondary secure sites like Tonopah for pilot training and operational deployment, before finally being revealed to the world years or even decades later. It worked for multiple generations of technology like the U-2 spy plane in the 1950s, or Mach 3 fast SR-71 Blackbird in the 1960s. Later, the dawn of stealth technology arrived with the F-117 and the B-2 bomber. We can assume that nowadays the same system works for advanced autonomous drone swarms, hypersonic glide vehicles, and the next-generation air dominance fighter program. Testing technology of this magnitude requires more than just a long runway. It requires mock enemy radar installations, simulated combat environments, and hundreds of miles of empty sky to push experimental engines to their absolute breaking point without civilians hearing the sonic booms. It requires a network of deep underground bunkers, radar-evading hangars, and heavily defended perimeters. A single base simply cannot handle the development, testing, training, and deployment of a superpower's entire next-generation arsenal. It requires an empire. Actually, the system might be even bigger than Nevada itself. Another look at the map. In the western states, you will also easily find a chain of highly secure military installations that all seem to connect. Just across the border in Utah lies the Dugway Proving Ground, an area larger than Rhode Island used for testing biological and chemical defense systems. Further south in New Mexico is the White Sands Missile Range. The United States has practically carved out a massive invisible corridor of restricted deserts across the western half of the continent, creating an unbroken chain of testing and development facilities. If you take a red pen and draw a line connecting all these restricted zones on a map, you are basically looking at a shadow state. Millions upon millions of acres of American soil are simply blacked out from public access, aviation charts, and civilian use. Now you know that it's not only about the mighty Area 51, marked on a map as the absolute center of all mysteries. It's more like a complex system spread across the whole country, operating right next to our everyday lives with something we believe is the only intention: to keep us all perfectly safe.
Can we estimate how many ships and airplanes were lost in the Bermuda Triangle? Have their disappearances resulted from human error or weather phenomena? Let's try to find out. We have a curious story of the SS Cotopaxi. This ship vanished in 1925, traveling from Charleston, South Carolina to Havana, Cuba. It never reached its destination. Years later, in the 1980s, a wreck was found 40 miles off St. Augustine, Florida. Since specialists could not precisely determine what and where it came from, they nicknamed it Bear Wreck. It took many additional years of work, done mainly by marine biologists, to identify that this ship was indeed the missing SS Cotopaxi. This was confirmed in January 2020. How how did the ship just reappear? And how did it get there, since this mysterious shipwreck isn't even in the Bermuda Triangle? Now, let's see who came up with this term, Bermuda Triangle. Can you actually pinpoint the triangle on a map? No, it's not an officially recognized location either. The Bermuda Triangle does not appear on any world map. Nobody has agreed on its exact boundaries. There are only assumptions with approximations of the entire area, ranging between 500,000 and 1.5 million square miles. By all approximations, the region has a vaguely triangular shape. In 1964, an American author named Vincent Hayes Gaddis first came up with the idea when writing an article for Argosy magazine. He used the Bermuda Triangle to describe a triangular region that has destroyed hundreds of ships and planes without a trace. It is pretty hard to get the number of lost ships and planes because some ships and aircraft have gone missing without leaving a trace. Their wreckage in the region has not been recovered, but the recorded stories should help us. Legends about the Bermuda Triangle date back to the 15th century, like that of the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus. When sailing through the Atlantic waters, he passed by this location in the late 1400s. In what we now know as the Bermuda Triangle, he saw a huge flame that seemed to just crash into the ocean. Later, he saw an unusual light flashing in the distance at the exact location. Like many other sailors since then, his compass had severe malfunctions. Flight 19, a Navy plane on a routine schedule back in 1945, also started the Bermuda Triangle legend. It was commanded by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, and it's recorded that he just got lost in the triangle for no reason. Since pilots had no GPS back then, they had to trust their compasses and keep track of how long they'd been flying in a specific direction and their speed. Shortly after completing the task, both of the compasses on board stopped working correctly. Records found after the plane's disappearance also indicate that Taylor didn't have a watch on that particular day. The initial report stated that pilot error was to blame for this unfortunate event. However, because people weren't satisfied with this outcome, it was changed to causes or reasons unknown after several reviews. One surviving pilot named Bruce Guerin suggested he went through an electronic fog while passing above the triangle, making him travel through time. In 1970, when this incident happened, he was flying his aircraft when it was surrounded by two huge clouds that formed a whirlpool and spiraled. Like many others before him, he noticed that his navigation devices were malfunctioning. When he eventually made it out of those clouds, he discovered that his flight had only taken 35 minutes. It should have taken 75 in total. Since he had no other reasonable explanation for what he went through, he believed he must have been pushed forward in time. It's not only strange-looking clouds that have been seen above the Bermuda Triangle. In 2014, a pilot recalled almost colliding with a flying object that he could not identify whatsoever. Some of these strange encounters were even caught on tape. It's the case of an early 2015 flight whose passengers noticed a curious object just floating over the ocean. The pilots have yet to figure out what they actually saw back there. Okay, not all of the possible explanations have been this unusual. Oceanographers, for example, have also tried to explain why ships disappear around here. So they recently came back to one of their old theories: rogue waves. These are immense walls of water that just pop up suddenly. If multiple such waves rise simultaneously, they overlap like a wave sandwich. If one single wave can reach over 30 feet tall and happen simultaneously, it can create a rogue wave that can surpass 100 feet high. These types of waves can quickly overtake even the biggest of ships. Meteorologists came up with their own explanation too: hexagonal clouds. These unusual types of clouds can generate winds of up to 170 miles per hour, and they're pretty significant too, some reaching 20 to 55 miles across. As such, waves inside these wind giants can go as high as 45 feet. The Earth's own magnetic force might also have something to do with it. Within the Bermuda Triangle, compasses point to true north, the geographic North Pole, rather than magnetic north, the shifting magnetic North Pole. Some have even explained that since these two perfectly overlap in the Bermuda Triangle, it can cause a magnetic phenomenon that could make navigational devices malfunction. It's called the agonic line. The problem is that scientists have discovered that this line moves each year. It might have passed through the Bermuda Triangle at one point, but it's now through the Gulf of Mexico. Other strange natural phenomenon found along the coast of Norway could help explain why the Bermuda Triangle has claimed so many ships. There are some deep craters there, measuring up to half a mile wide and are 150 feet deep. Scientists believe they were created by methane gas bubbles. This gas seems to be leaking from deposits hidden deep in the seabed. Once the gas reaches a certain quantity, it bursts to the surface and causes eruptions. So, do pilots and ship captains actually avoid this area today? Could this explain why there are fewer ships that get lost there nowadays? But if you've ever flown from Miami to San Juan, would be spoiled. To this day, there are a lot of flights that go over the Bermuda Triangle, so it's clear nobody is avoiding it. This place is one of the most heavily traveled shipping lanes in the world. Nowadays, the Bermuda Triangle has heavy daily traffic, both by sea and air. But the Bermuda Triangle is indeed subject to tropical storms and hurricanes that happen very often. Let's also keep in mind that the Gulf Stream, a strong ocean current that causes sharp changes in local weather, passes through the Bermuda Triangle. Besides, the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, the Milwaukee Depth, is also located in the Bermuda Triangle. The Puerto Rico Trench reaches almost 27,500 feet at the Milwaukee Depth. So, if you think about it, the whole mystery is a perfect combination of human error, bad weather, and a lot of ship traffic. This was confirmed by data provided by the U.S. Coast Guard. If you look at percentages, the number of ships or planes that go missing in the Bermuda Triangle isn't different from anywhere else. Disappearances do not happen more often than in any comparable region of the Atlantic Ocean. Official statistics say around 50 ships and 20 airplanes have vanished while traveling through this region. So that's another reason why the total number is so hard to pinpoint. Nobody could describe its rescue in official records if a boat was reported missing. There are also some events that, it turns out, didn't happen at all, adding to those false reports, like that of a plane crash back in 1937 off Daytona Beach, Florida, that local papers surprisingly revealed nothing about.
Most people think of continents as permanent. Europe is Europe. North America is North America. Their borders feel ancient, pretty much fixed and untouchable. But there is one country on Earth where that illusion breaks apart in real time. Now, I've got a question for you. Which country sits on two continents? If you're a geography guru, you may name countries like Kazakhstan, which is mostly in Asia but does have a small part in Europe. Or maybe Egypt, which stretches from Africa into Asia across the Sinai Peninsula, famously using the Suez Canal as a continental boundary. But I'm talking about Iceland here. You have every right to say, wait, Iceland is in Europe, period. And culturally and politically, you'd be absolutely right. But geologically, that's a completely different story. You see, Iceland is a country where the planet is physically pulling itself open. You can stand with one foot in North America and the other in Europe. Not symbolically. The ground beneath you literally belongs to two entirely different tectonic plates drifting away from each other every single year. And the separation is still happening right now. Every year, the gap grows by roughly 1 inch. That may sound tiny, almost meaningless, but that same slow movement has already reshaped the surface of the Earth. Over tens of millions of years, it opened the entire Atlantic Ocean. It separated land masses that once sat side by side on a single supercontinent. The same force stretching Iceland today is the reason New York and London now sit thousands of miles apart. So no, Iceland is not simply a country with volcanoes. It is one of the only places on Earth where you can literally watch continental drift happening with your own eyes. And it sounds simple when you first hear it. A country between two continents. Cool geography fact. But once you really understand what's happening there, Iceland becomes one of the strangest places on the planet. Because beneath the Atlantic Ocean lies something enormous, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This thing is massive, but over 90% of it is hidden underwater, which is why most people have never heard of it. And Iceland is one of the very few places where part of that underwater mountain range rises above sea level. That alone makes the country geologically extraordinary. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge marks the boundary between two gigantic tectonic plates, the North American Plate and the Eurasian Plate. And these plates are not stationary slabs of rock. They move constantly, driven by slow currents of superheated material deep inside Earth's mantle. At Iceland, those plates are diverging, pulling apart, separating inch by inch, just like a bag of chips that you tear open. Normally, this process happens invisibly beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Nobody actually sees continents moving apart because it usually happens under miles of water. But Iceland is different. Iceland sits directly on top of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge itself, which means you can literally walk across one of the most important geological boundaries on the planet. And probably the best place to see this is Thingvellir National Park in southwestern Iceland. At first glance, the place almost looks unreal. The landscape is ripped apart by enormous cracks and canyons, with jagged black lava fields stretching in every direction. Massive rock walls rise straight out of the earth like the remains of some collapsed ancient world. But these are not just old geological scars frozen in time. These fractures are active. They exist because North America and Europe are still pulling away from each other beneath your feet right now. And most visitors walking through the area have absolutely no idea they are literally standing between continents. In some places, the water filling these fissures is so unbelievably clear that you can see deep into the submerged fault lines below. And the landscape itself is still changing. Over the last 10,000 years, the Thingvellir Rift Valley widened by roughly 230 feet and sank around 130 feet as the tectonic plates kept separating. So this is not some ancient event that happened millions of years ago and then stopped. The process is still happening today, which naturally raises a pretty obvious question. If Iceland sits directly between two tectonic plates moving away from each other, why hasn't the island already split in half? And the answer is what makes Iceland even stranger. As the plates slowly pull apart, pressure deep underground drops, allowing molten rock from Earth's mantle to rise upward and fill the gap. Once that magma reaches the surface, it cools into completely new crust. So Iceland is basically being torn apart and rebuilt at the exact same time. That balance is what keeps the island together. This entire process is known as seafloor spreading, and it is one of the main forces shaping the surface of our planet. As tectonic plates drift apart, magma rises from deep inside the Earth, cools into volcanic rock, and creates entirely new crust. Without this process, the Atlantic Ocean itself would not even exist. Around 60 million years ago, the Atlantic was dramatically smaller than it is today. North America and Europe sat much closer together as leftovers of the ancient supercontinent Pangaea. Then the Mid-Atlantic Ridge slowly began forcing them apart. It didn't happen through giant apocalyptic explosions or one massive catastrophic event. It happened thanks to simple, relentless movement measured in inches per year. And honestly, that's the part human brains struggle to understand. An inch per year sounds harmless because human lives are short, but geological forces do not care about human timescales. They never stop, and over millions of years, tiny movements become oceans. The Atlantic Ocean itself is basically proof of that. and Iceland sits directly on the fault line where that expansion is still happening today. The island's volcanic activity is part of the exact same process. Iceland is one of the most volcanically active places on Earth, with more than 15 volcanoes erupting there during the last century alone. And this is not random bad luck. Iceland occupies an incredibly unusual geological position because it sits not only on the mid-Atlantic ridge, but also directly above something called a mantle plume. Basically, a massive column of superheated rock rising from deep inside the planet. You can think of it like a giant underground blowtorch constantly feeding magma into Iceland's crust and fueling volcanoes across the island. And the result is a landscape that feels unfinished in the best possible way. Lava fields still warm from recent eruptions, steam vents hissing straight out of the ground, geysers blasting boiling water into freezing air. So while in many countries geological history feels ancient and distant, and in Iceland geology feels pretty much alive. Some eruptions there are so large they actually create entirely new land. Fresh lava cools into black volcanic rock, slowly expanding Iceland outward. So even though the tectonic plates are trying to pull the island apart, volcanic activity keeps adding new material back in. Iceland is basically patching itself faster than it can fully split open. Now, that does not mean Iceland is stable in the normal sense. Earthquakes are still common. Cracks can still open unexpectedly. Entire regions rise and sink as magma moves beneath the surface. Scientists constantly monitor the island using GPS stations, satellites, and seismic instruments, because Iceland functions almost like a live laboratory for plate tectonics. And honestly, there are very few places on Earth where researchers can observe continental drift this directly, and even fewer where ordinary people can physically experience it themselves. There's even a location on Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula called the Bridge Between Continents. It's a small footbridge spanning a fissure created by the separating tectonic plates, and tourists casually walk across it in seconds, crossing from the North American plate to the Eurasian plate. Not gonna lie, that sounds almost fake when you first hear it. Like, a literal bridge between continents? Seriously? But the deeper reality behind it is even stranger. But it all makes sense once you realize continents are not permanent objects. They're fragments of crust floating atop a dynamic planet. They merge, split apart, collide, sink, and reform over unimaginable spans of time. If you had landed on Earth a really long time ago, about 1.5 billion years in the past, you wouldn't have recognized our planet. At that time, all the land was stuck together in one giant supercontinent called Nuna, which was surrounded by an endless ocean. But if you had stuck around, you'd have witnessed a planetary-scale disaster, Nuna falling apart. But the most amazing thing is that apparently, when Nuna started breaking apart, it kicked off changes that made Earth a much better place for life. Scientists used to call this part of Earth's history the Boring Billion. It lasted from about 1.8 billion to 800 million years ago. Not much seemed to happen during that time, hence the name. No big climate changes, no bizarre life forms, and nothing very dramatic. Turns out the name isn't very fair. Things may have looked calm on the surface, but underneath, Earth was changing a lot. Continents were moving, splitting apart, and coming back together. Two massive supercontinents, Nuna and later Rodinia, formed and broke up during this time. When Nuna began to break apart, huge cracks opened between the drifting land pieces. Water filled those spaces, creating shallow seas. Those seas were warmer, calmer, and had more oxygen than the deep oceans that existed before. And that might have changed everything. The new seas created friendlier conditions for life to grow and change. Scientists now think they may have helped early life become more complex. They looked back 1.8 billion years and rebuilt how Earth's tectonic plates moved over time. Plus, they tracked how carbon was stored inside the planet and released into the air. The researchers did this using a new advanced computer model that gave way more detail than they had ever had before. They found out that during the 350 million years of the so-called boring billion, the amount of shallow seas along the edges of continents doubled. Altogether, these coastlines stretched about 81,000 miles. That's more than 3 times around Earth at the equator. At the same time, subduction zones, places where one tectonic plate slides under another, actually got shorter as the continents shifted around. This is important because subduction zones are where a lot of volcanoes come from. When one plate sinks under another, seawater gets dragged deep into the Earth. That water helps rocks melt, creating magma. The magma rises, erupts as volcanoes, and releases gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So when there were fewer subduction zones, there were fewer volcanoes, and less carbon dioxide was pumped into the air. It went like this. The supercontinent Nuna broke apart, and it created lots of brand new ocean floors in young seas that didn't exist before. These new ocean floors pulled carbon dioxide out of the air. Seawater flowed into cracks in the ocean floor. When that happened, carbon got trapped in rocks, forming limestone. Over time, this process locked carbon away inside Earth instead of letting it stay in the atmosphere. With less carbon dioxide, Earth slowly cooled down. That cooler climate helped the new shallow seas become stable and rich in oxygen. Such calm, oxygen-filled environments are perfect for life to become more complex. Those huge shallow seas near the continents acted like safe nurseries for early life. They may have helped eukaryotes evolve faster. Eukaryotes are living things with complex cells. Cells that have parts inside them, like a nucleus that holds DNA. Every animal, plant, and fungus on Earth comes from these kinds of cells. So when eukaryotes appeared, it was a huge moment in the history of life. Scientists already knew that eukaryotes showed up during the boring billion because of fossils that are about 1 billion years old, but they didn't really know why this happened at that time. Now, scientists want to find better preserved early eukaryote fossils to learn exactly how complex life first evolved. Life on Earth started over 3 billion years ago. It began with tiny, simple microbes and slowly turned into a huge variety of living things. We still don't have a clear answer about how living things came out of that early primordial soup, but even though there's no final answer yet, scientists have come up with several theories to try to explain how life on Earth may have started. Some scientists think lightning helped start life on Earth. The idea is pretty simple. Lightning is a powerful spark, and sparks can cause chemical reactions. In a famous experiment from 1952, scientists showed that electric sparks could turn simple gases like water vapor and methane into amino acids and sugars, which are basic building blocks of life. This suggested that lightning and early Earth storms might have helped create the first life ingredients. But later research showed Earth's early air wasn't exactly like the experiment. Still, some scientists think volcanic clouds could have had the right gases and lots of lightning, making this process possible. Other experts think life may have started on clay. One researcher suggested that tiny clay crystals could grow and stick together in patterns. As they did, they could trap simple molecules and line them up in organized ways. Think of clay as a kind of early organizer. Today, DNA tells molecules how to line up and work together. But what if clay had been doing a similar job before DNA even existed? It could be helping molecules arrange themselves until they eventually learned to organize on their own. This idea was interesting and got a lot of attention, but most scientists don't fully accept it yet. Another popular theory is that life started at deep-sea vents on the ocean floor. These vents are cracks in Earth's crust where super hot water shoots out from deep inside the planet. As the water rises, it picks up important chemicals like carbon and hydrogen, which are key ingredients for life. The vents are full of tiny rock spaces where these chemicals could collect, mix, and react. The rocks may have helped speed up these reactions. Even today, deep-sea vents house rich ecosystems, even though it's dark there and the whole environment is kinda extreme. Scientists are still studying this idea. In 2019, researchers even created early life-like structures in lab conditions similar to these vents. Such an experiment showed that this theory could really work. Another idea is that life may have started under ice. Scientists believe Earth's oceans might have been covered in ice around 3 billion years ago. Sounds pretty severe, right? But the cold may have actually helped life get started. Many of the chemical building blocks of life, like simple amino acids, are more stable at low temperatures. In warmer water, these molecules break down quickly and are spread far apart. But when water freezes, it pushes those molecules together, increasing their concentration. This crowding makes chemical reactions more likely. So, let's say the molecules were packed closer together and were breaking down more slowly. In this case, they had more chances to link up and form more complex structures. Ice may have also acted like a protective blanket. It could shield the water from harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun and from damage caused by meteor impacts. Another idea is that life didn't start on Earth at all. This theory is called panspermia, and it suggests that life came from space. Scientists know that big asteroid impacts can blast rocks off of planets. For example, rocks from Mars have been knocked into space before, and some of them ended up on Earth. Some researchers think tiny microbes might have survived inside space rocks during the journey. If that's true, life here could have started thanks to visitors from Mars, or some other cosmic world. Others go even further and suggest that life could have traveled on comets or space dust from completely different star systems, hitching a ride across the galaxy. At the same time, even if panspermia is real, it doesn't fully solve the mystery. It just moves the question somewhere else. Instead of asking how life began on Earth,